Lately, there have been a slew of videos coming out showing law enforcement officials using excessive force. And I do not use the word excessive lightly.
Oh, no. Are you serious? Are you serious?
Did you shoot my dog? You shot my dog!
Now, in response to videos like this coming out, which we've been seeming to see a lot of lately, there's a new trend that's starting to spread. In 3 states already, it is now illegal to film an on-duty police officer, even if the encounter involves you, and even if it might be necessary to use in your defense. So, are cameras now being treated as the new guns, the new weapon that civilians use to protect themselves against police? Well, earlier, I caught up with Jim Hansen, a retired Special Operations Master Sergeant and military blogger. And I first asked him about that video we just showed you, where the cop punched a woman in the face in Seattle. So I asked him if in any law enforcement circles, that would actually be considered a reasonable way to handle that situation.
Well, I mean, the video as it is seen in that context sure seems a little bit excessive. I mean, there are situations where a punch to the face might be the best answer, but you'd need to have an idea that the officer's in jeopardy. You know, maybe they went for his weapon. Maybe in this case, the only, I would say, rationale that would have made it possible is if there was a crowd closing in on him that we couldn't see from the perspective of the video that we saw.
Well, that's the thing is, you know, there was no crowd. It didn't seem like he was in jeopardy. I mean, this also was a woman. And so, you know, I think that's something that we have to note in the fact that so many of these recent videos where we see police using excessive force, well, the reason we even know about these stories is because there is a video there. There is that proof there. And yet 3 states already have laws making it illegal for people to film on-duty officers. What's your take on those laws? Do you agree with them?
I don't understand where they get the gall to make a law like that. I mean, it's one thing if it's an undercover operation. Then I see it's completely justified. I think the officers should take someone aside and say, hey, look, this is an undercover operation. You could expose our identities, potentially put us and something important in jeopardy. But if it's just a situation of an officer operating in public, conducting his job as a paid employee of the taxpayers, I don't see how you can say the people don't have a right to film. It's insane.
Seems the same way to me. So you would be okay if you were a police officer out today on the street with people filming you on their cell phones?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not an officer now and I haven't been, but the point is that when they're working on behalf of the people, I don't see where there is a reason as a public servant. You know, their job is to protect and serve the people. Why would that not be a public action? And I don't understand, first of all, why the people would even put up with that. You know, that's something where if elected officials wanted to do that, that would be, in my mind, a good reason not to have that person as my elected official.
I agree. And I mean, if anything, officers are supposed to be the most law-abiding ones. So, you know, what do you really have to hide? But let me ask you this, because a lot of people are saying that what's happening here is that cameras, the way they're changing the game entirely, they're almost becoming the new gun, the new weapon that civilians can use to protect themselves against law enforcement.
You know, I think the attitude that civilians need to be protected from law enforcement might be a bit of overkill on that side of things, but I don't see why the ubiquity of video is something that the police should look at as a bad thing. I mean, in some of these cases, they're going to be vindicated. You know, you would hope in the majority of cases where video comes into play, which is why the police started putting cameras on the dashboards of their cars, was so that when someone made a false claim about them, they could vindicate themselves. So if it's a situation now where there are simply more cameras in more places with more people, then I think the police should adapt to that and go ahead and make sure that their actions are going to be validated by that rather than turn into a situation where it shows them in a poor light. But we also still have to give them benefit of the doubt in a situation where you can't see the context. You know, there was a crowd around that officer in Seattle. It's just we can't see it from the view of that one particular video camera.
Well, that's true. A video does only give you sometimes a little snippet, only a piece of that information. And I think that that really will start changing people's minds. You're right in the sense that now you feel like officers are someone, or some people feel like officers are people they need to be protected against. And I think that more and more videos like this, if they keep coming out, are only going to fuel those feelings from people. But, you know, let me ask you this. Right now, like I said, there are 3 states that have this law. If this becomes a trend, if more states start adopting this same thing, then what does that mean for the justice system? Do the people automatically lose out?
I think it would be a travesty if this became a trend in that direction. And once again, I said I don't understand where an elected official would feel validated in taking away the right of people in a public place to film a public event. I mean, and I think at some point, it's obviously a free speech and First Amendment issue. And I would hope if it becomes, you know, in any of these states, if these laws are upheld, that they get challenged either at the federal level or else, you know, wherever they can. Free speech grounds. How are you going to say, you know, who is allowed to film what? It's an egregious violation of the public's right to their own comments.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for giving us your perspective on that. I definitely think that, you know, it's ridiculous, and especially if we look at some of the cases in those states where they have the law. These are people that, you know, the charges got dropped against them for perhaps selling a piece of artwork for $1 on the street illegally, but they are now being tried with filming the police officers, which are sentences from 4 to 15 years, which is insane to me. All right, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alona.